Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about spirituality. That's right, spirituality. Haven't had a chat about that in a while, but this one may be a little bit of a shocker for some, but it's important, I think, because, hey, the word is used lots, isn't it? And after all, coffee chat, in its early days, I'll turn the light on here so I get a bit better. In the early days of coffee chat, we actually talked a lot about spirituality. It was something that I was very, very much into at the time in terms of having read about The Secret and Wallace Wattles and some of the early American transcendentalists and so on. And it was just very intriguing. New Thought, uh, Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, and all those people. I was really into that for a while in terms of, and this actually relates a little bit to that, I think, what we're going to talk about today. So, I'm going to grab my cup and pull a Scott Adams. Except this is not coffee. I got to be the only person with a channel called Coffee Chat, but I don't drink coffee. Not entirely true. I do drink it once in a while strategically if I got to drive a long ways or something like that. And I actually quite enjoy it. But not this late at night. That's for sure. I'd never sleep. The question here is, though, on spirituality. Is Donald Trump a spiritual guy? Yes, this is a bit of clickbait, of course. Yes, we're going to talk about Donald Trump once in a while. I would say that, first of all, I hope to make the case that he is a very spiritual guy. And what I mean by spiritual, because before people get up in my grill here about, oh, spiritual, that has to do with Jesus or something like that, right? Well, what I mean by it here is, connecting with creative forces. I'm going to say creative forces within, because the creative forces that we can pragmatically use, right? Being able to connect with them and being able to create because of that. And just an observation that any great creator, many great creators anyways, they're vilified, seriously vilified by the status quo of the time. And look at what's happening to Trump, right? Look at what's happening to Trump. Of course, he is a threat for sure. And touching on Scott Adams, mentioned Scott Adams with his coffee with Scott Adams. He was doing a talk, one of his periscopes recently, and he was talking about how, and I was already aware of this for quite some time actually, that Donald Trump is a student of Norman Vincent Peale. You could say the grandfather or the godfather of what I would call prosperity theology, or more commonly termed self-help or personal growth or something like that. He wrote the very famous book, The Power of Positive Thinking. This is Donald Trump's formative years. And lots of people would want to roll their eyes at a thought like that, but nevertheless, I'm going to go on to say that being able to have a power of positive thinking to the point where one becomes creative as a result, positively creative, in the face of unbelievable slander and unbelievable negativity thrown at him just like as in heaps of dung, right? And to have that perpetual positivity, that fantastic, and this sort of thing is quite amazing. It's quite amazing. And I would say that Trump may be the most astounding example of the power of positive thinking alive today. Just to watch him is, whether one likes him or not, we can learn a lot from what he is doing and has done. And another thing that I want to talk about, which is a bit of a sidebar here, because the way when my thoughts come out, they come out not necessarily linearly. Yeah, well, maybe we'll come back to that one later. And so prayer, too, the word prayer is often associated with spirituality, or religiosity at least. And prayer, of course, is, in the definition I count here, is that calling forth creative powers for what's wanted. And an affirmation is like a prayer in a way. It could be ritualistic, which prayers are, and it could be directed towards a deity, or it could be directed inwardly, or it could be directed towards creative powers in general, or it could just be speaking what looks like delusional thinking, but nevertheless it's speaking creative powers into this void of what is not yet, but to the point where the mind actually believes it's true. Scott Adam makes this case, I've made this case before too, is that Trump is accused of lying lots. And to somebody who's not familiar with affirmations, somebody who speaks in affirmations while he's talking in public, which is what Trump does, he can look delusional because he's talking about what isn't ostensibly, what isn't in reality, but he's speaking a reality that he wants to see. You know, he could be, every newspaper in the country can be slandering him, front page, and telling on a witch hunt of all of the people who who's supporting him and himself, and making up all kinds of nonsense like Russian collusion and stuff like that. But he still speaks that we're doing fantastically well. And he does these speeches, and he's got all these glowing words. He doesn't have a whole lot of them, but he has glowing words or at least he doesn't present a lot of them, for America. He has this wonderful outlook for America, this making America great again. That's also an affirmation, by the way, making America great again. It's positive. It's speaking what he wants right there. And people say, well, that he's lying. Well, if it's not seen from the power of positive thinking's affirmation sort of methodology, then it looks that way. And also he's got a strategy within that, which is not really a spiritual thing. This is just an added on strategy, I think, which is a strategy of diversion. For example, he starts talking about building a wall, and then he asks, well, who's going to pay for it? And the Mexicans are going to pay for it. And he repeats this. So the mainstream media already, they hate him anyway. So no matter what he does, they're going to run after it as crazy. So if he throws two things out, wall and Mexican paying for it, well, the mainstream media is going to go after what they perceive as the most outrageous, that Mexico is going to pay for it, because that, of course, is racist, right, in their mind, because everything to do with anybody. If there's any name attached to it, unless they're white people, it's racist if it's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, because that's what they think is traction for them. I think their traction is a little bit bald by now. You know, they've worn out their tires a bit too much. But nevertheless, they chase after that. Like a dog, after you throw two balls out in the field, the dog wonders and it chooses which one to go after, leaves the other one alone. So they leave the wall alone. And they start talking about, he thinks Mexicans are going to build the wall. So now they're already talking about the wall as it's a done deal. So he's injected the affirmation into even his enemies, which is really astounding. And that's spiritual as well, of course. And some people might say, well, you know, how is this spiritual? This is everyday stuff. This is humanity. Well, you know what? I'm reading this book, and I've felt this way very strongly myself too for quite some time. Oops, I'm gonna almost lose my thing here. This book, it's called True Humanism by Maritain. I think it's Jacques Maritain. Could be wrong on the last name. It's my dad's book, and it was written back in the 30s. Yeah, Jacques Maritain. And in there he talks about how in the Middle Ages, the early Christians, Christians of that time, they saw that everything was connected. They didn't see themselves as separate from nature and whatnot, right? And down through the years, through different pseudo-philosophers and so on, they split things up. Of course, the French Revolution had all these, you know, that's where communism comes out of, where you get this class struggle and what have you, and there's the gods, and there's man, and there's different kinds of man, and there's higher class, upper class, lower class, and so on, the bourgeoisie and so on. So everything got divided. I'm not sure exactly how, but that's along the lines, everything got divided. And now we have this mantra that there's man and nature, right? Well, if we think about it, a bird builds a nest, ants build a nest, an ant hill. Donald Trump builds a 100-story high-rise. Oh, he didn't build it himself, my friend, if you're watching me, but he's the author of it, right? Because he's the one who got it going. And how is that any different, right? Because Donald Trump is a sentient being, is a mammal. The bird is a bird, but it's, a gopher builds a bunch of gophers build a gopher town, right? They're mammals. And Donald Trump can build a Mar-a-Lago or whatever. And what's the difference? Well, there's a difference in complexity, for sure, but it's still nature, right? All those towers and that Mar-a-Lago and so on is built with earthly resources in the same way that the gopher builds its town with earthly resources. It's built with the labor of gophers there, and built with the labor of man over here. Both of them are mammals, right? The difference is that the man is more spiritual. The man is able to call forth those inner powers of creativity and speak and make something out of the unknown, able to envision what he wants. So he doesn't have to build the same structure like the bird. Bird will build for 10, 40,000, 100,000 years to build the same nest, all the different birds. And man in a couple of years will change its style. So first of all, man is much more spiritual in that respect, being able to call forth those powers change than the bird is. And there's certain men within the greater group of men, and I would say that Donald Trump is one of those, who is highly spiritual in a very practical sense like that. So yes, I would say that Donald Trump is a very spiritual man in the sense that I'm talking about here, because he's able to call forth those powers. He's able to access those powers of amazing creativity. And I think a lot of it has to do with his upbringing of Norman Vincent Peale. And they were very close, of course, Norman Vincent Peale and Donald Trump. They had to have been, because Norman Vincent Peale officiated over Donald Trump's first marriage. Can you imagine that? The godfather of personal development officiating over this guy's marriage. That's pretty tight. Personal pastor when he was young. A few comments. Let me know what you think. Steve here again. Great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And message here today is, even if we don't like somebody, we can sure learn from them. And I think there's one heck of a lot we can learn from the spirituality of Donald Trump. Talk again soon. Bye for now.